some solution. And I think this is the right time, because it was mentioned that rules and forms need to be changed. Because BPR exercise, that is a business process re-engineering exercise, was done before CPC was launched. Now that the new income tax form act is there, 2025, it's time to see which forms are redundant. There are many forms which may not be required to be taken forward to the new regime. Instead of converting it ditto to the new regime with new software, which will have its challenges. Nobody pointed out in India how many changes in law take place in a year, based on our desires or representation which CBDT receives in large numbers. Every year budget sees changes. And to convert each change into law into software is a Herculean task. Abroad, I am told 1.5 years is taken from the point a change in law comes to the time it is put into practice. Now, every year ITR forms are changed. If you see, ITR schedules are changed, everything is changed. Why? Because there have been changes in law. The changes in law come from civil society recommendation. They don't come out of any vacuum. These come from desires, these come from recommendations. The amount of lobbying that takes place for single changes in law, this gets, probably there is time to put a hold on to this. It will reduce a lot of pain for people if we can cut down on frequent changes into law, or at least give adequate time to the software professionals who design these forms, who design these utilities. There was some mention about changes in utilities and other things. Those are works in progress. It's a constant work in progress. In a year, so many changes take place, and there are certain years you have 2 budgets. There are 2 finance acts. And imagine for a person who's testing, your form is placed into public domain on a particular date. After that, to design the utility and release a form within a time, there are a lot of challenges. I have no desire to justify from the department's point of view. I'm just trying to put the context, put the information in a wider context. There's been no mention about the information surfeit that is available with the department now. If you just look at BBMP portal, where approvals are given for construction of buildings in Bangalore, or to go to the Kaveri portal, the amount of information that is available for downloading for the department, and if you were to convert it into 148, probably it will that will take care of the entire revenue targets for 1 year for the entire income tax department. And nobody has mentioned that there is a great amount of tax evasion in the country still. And there is a lot of societal desire to bring people to tax, people who are not filing taxes. You'll be surprised to know that many of these people who are registered on these portals have not even filed their returns, let alone go to the department for payment of taxes or anything else. So there is information. That information has to be converted. Now there can be various viewpoints, how much of it should be put to 148, or what it should be the procedure. But please accept, we live in an unequal society. This unequal society should not be further exacerbated by various desires and other things. We are still a country which is developing. We need to collect taxes, and that is the pressure the department works. Again, I'm a retired person. I'm not trying to defend the department. I'm just trying to put the wider context to it. I just want to add to a last point. There was a mention that department wants to collect 20% of taxes because revenue will increase. They say you file an appeal. I don't think that's the truth. We have surfeit of taxes. In the last 10 years, there's never been a year when we have not met our target. This year also we are 7%. That 20% doesn't meet, it may be a drop in the ocean. Most of the taxes are prepaid. If you look at the composition of taxes, 90% of it comes as prepaid. So I don't think that's a thing. It may be a pain point to you at that point to pay 20% of taxes, but that's not a factually true position. There are many points I would like to respond to, but I would just say I was very happy to discuss about alternate dispute resolution processes for which were mentioned, use of technological tools, and I am sure that more such exercises we can undertake, and where we can come forward with some suggestions which can be taken up by the people who can put it to practice. So in that process, we have started this journey with a small footstep on a long journey, and I thank you for being co-travelers, and we hope these will lead to something meaningful. Thank you very much.
Quick vote of thanks from Smita. Formal vote of thanks. Since you said it, you are not a vote of thanks.
We were planning on letting it go, but since Sanjay sir mentioned that it's not the vote of thanks. Thank you to everyone for taking your time on this Friday evening, for coming and joining this conversation. Thank you to Aravind sir. Thank you to representatives from ITAT, from the department, from kind of all different points of view. For us at DAKSH, I think ready and having it in a phrase that when there is an opportunity to bring it to another forum, to bring it to another conversation, it is in a good state and it's ready to go. So we hope this is the first of many of these conversations which can help clarify and put some of these together. And I think a lot of great points have been raised today as well about areas of further work to dig a little deeper, put some data together, kind of understand the sections, the areas that are giving rise to the most litigation, and analyze that further. So thank you on behalf of DAKSH and Esperti Fiscali. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And please come upstairs. We have, I think we would like to just give a small token of appreciation. A memento to our chief guest for the day. Sir.
These books.
Okay.
These are dummy publications.
Okay, yeah. Shita's just going to come and try to take
Thank you,
the
sir.
photo. Thank you so much, sir. All right, so dinner is ready. It is upstairs. I think our team will help kind of guide us up. Please stick around and spend some time interacting with each other and with us. And we look forward to future conversations on this.
And faceless scheme. So a lot of blame which has been laid today probably comes to my door. And now I'm retired, so not much vigilance action can be also taken against me. I'm also to be blamed for being the first CIT of CPC, setting up CPC, where a lot of, I think, grievances and problems arise. So I'd like to just take 2 minutes of your time. I know it's Madhuri getting late for dinner. Just to put the context, and I think this we didn't start with that context in the beginning. There is a wider ecosystem in which the entire the problem has to be placed. This entire problem, there has been over-advent, or you can say overuse of technology platforms in India, and as rightly mentioned that India is one of the early adopters of technology, and the desire for bringing in faceless systems was not a sudden desire. It was developed over a period of time. There were lacuna in the earlier system of assessment, and it was thought that an identity-blind system of assessment will reduce biases, discretions, and it will bring in uniformity. There was a logic to it, and there had been a thought process of group assessment within the department. Rather than leaving it to the doorsteps of a single assessing officer to take a decision on a particular matter, it was thought that he, with the prior approval of an administrative additional commissioner of income tax, who is a very senior officer, two people apply their mind, there would be a fair opportunity for the taxpayer to present. I am not trying to deny any of the issues that have been raised today, but it was not a sudden advent of faceless system. There was a thought process, there was use of technology, and similar things about the faceless appeal system. The idea was that it should be uniform application of law to reduce discretion and, as I mentioned, identity blind, so that discretion can be removed and other practices can also be done. And it was to use of technology platforms. While there has been greater success in processing of returns, I am sure CPC's successes are visible to everybody here. Out of 10 crore returns, probably 9.5 will go processed without any issues. And the figure which is mentioned in rectification, I'm told, is not more than 1.5 lakh rectifications in a year out of 10 crores. So 1.5 lakhs is a minuscule number, and that could be due to various factors, but I entirely admit to the issues which are plagued by many members here, faced by the members, about interaction between JAO and CPC. This is what was being mentioned. Now that I'm retired, I'm not in a position to give any gyan or knowledge about what could be done or what could be done, but I'm sure people are working on it and there would be resolution. All the technology platforms are in a state of upgradation. ITBA 2.0 tender has been released, and that has been done after, I think, 2 decades nearly, that ITBA is upgraded, and CPC 3.0 is in offing. And hopefully, as my colleague Dr. Zakir Thomas, who is DG System, would also agree with me, that both these systems will interact more frequently, being on the same technology and faceless scheme. So a lot of blame which has been laid today probably comes to my door. And now I'm retired, so not much vigilance action can be also taken against me. I'm also to be blamed for being the first CIT of CPC, setting up CPC, where a lot of, I think, grievances and problems arise. So I'd like to just take 2 minutes of your time. I know it's Madhuri getting late for dinner. just to put the context, and I think this we didn't start with that context in the beginning, there is a wider ecosystem in which the entire the problem has to be placed. This entire problem, there has been over advent, or you can say overuse of technology platforms in India, and as rightly mentioned that India is one of the early adopters of technology, and the desire for bringing in faceless systems was not a sudden desire. It was developed over a period of time. There were lacuna in the earlier system of assessment, and it was thought that an identity blind system of assessment will reduce biases, discretions, and it will bring in uniformity. There was a logic to it, and there had been a thought process of group assessment within the department. Rather than leaving it to the doorsteps of a single assessing officer to take a decision on a particular matter, it was thought that he, with the prior approval of an administrative additional commissioner of income tax, who is a very senior officer, two people apply their mind, there would be a fair opportunity for the taxpayer to present. I am not trying to deny any of the issues that have been raised today, but it was not a sudden advent of faceless system. There was a thought process, there was use of technology, and similar things about the faceless appeal system. The idea was that it should be uniform application of law to reduce discretion, and as I mentioned, identity blind, so that discretion can be removed and other practices can also be done. And it was to use of technology platforms. While there has been greater success in processing of returns, I'm sure CPC's successes are visible to everybody here. Out of 10 crore returns, probably 9.5 will go processed without any issues. And the figure which is mentioned in rectification, I'm told, is not more than 1.5 lakh rectifications in a year out of 10 crores. So 1.5 lakhs is a minuscule number, and that could be due to various factors, but I entirely admit to the issues which are plagued by many members here, faced by the members, about interaction between JAO and CPC. This is what was being mentioned. Now that I'm retired, I'm not in a position to give any gyan or knowledge about what could be done or what could be done, but I'm sure people are working on it and there would be resolution. All the technology platforms are in a state of upgradation. ITBA 2.0 tender has been released, and that has been done after, I think, 2 decades nearly, that ITBA is upgraded, and CPC 3.0 is in offing. And hopefully, as my colleague Dr. Zakir Thomas, who is DG System, would also agree with me, that both these systems will interact more frequently, being on the same technology.
On structures and entering into transactions. But over the last 4 years, when I've started doing tax litigation, both indirect and direct, and I told Surya that, listen, Surya always used to tell me that, tax litigation, there's not too much of a problem because he has a tax background. I said, I thought you told me there's not too much of a concern compared to other areas of litigation. So I look at it from dispute resolution as a whole. So in my view, the first question, anybody talks about disputes in India is, oh, there's so much pendency. Okay, so I won't repeat all of that. But the question, particularly with respect to tax, it's a unique perspective because citizens, we have empowered the state to tax us so that society can function. And in this relationship, because the government needs to ensure that everybody pays up correctly, there are certain policing powers, which is normally only the realm of criminal law, but even policing powers, I'm using policing powers in a very loose sense, given to tax authorities to ensure that people pay their taxes properly and appropriately. And obviously there's going to be litigation around this. Just in those 2 sentences. The government needs money to ensure that society functions, and we need to pay up for our own good. And we have empowered the government to do so. When you have this construct, disputes are bound to happen. So you can't ensure that there are no disputes. So let's leave that out. So when disputes arise, how do we resolve them? So the judiciary is obviously burdened because of various other reasons. I won't go into all of that. But just looking at the direct tax litigation as such, the life cycle of a tax dispute can be anywhere between 1 to 15 years if you're looking at going all the way to the Supreme Court. Now just measure that in terms of the ability of an individual to earn income. You are looking at, an average individual, say by the time he reaches a particular income level, leaving out all these startup, billionaires and all that, you're looking at, 30, 35, when you start reaching a level of bracket, and you look at historically how Indian income tax has come, 30, 35, and then go on until about 60 years. Now, if you, for some reason, have some sort of a dispute with the department when you're 40, it'll probably get resolved when you're 55. And if you look at it purely in terms of the life cycle of an individual who is going through a dispute, don't look at the dispute. All of us are lawyers and tax professionals in this room, so we tend to look at the dispute. We don't look at the people behind the dispute and the reason for that. I have had many clients in the past who have told me, sir, we are closing down our industry because we can't resolve the dispute with the department. And this is true. I mean, this is not anecdotal. Businesses have gone bust. Businesses get into stress if there is a tax issue. So this is a reality that disputes arise, but disputes can't be avoided. How do you manage them? Obviously, any discretionary use of powers in terms of assessment will be something that is going to cause angst with the assessee. But why is the question. Now, one of the fundamental principles of the rule of law is certainty and clarity. Two rather, not one. Two of the fundamental principles are clarity and certainty. And more so in tax. And this is the point when we discuss in DAKSH. See, in tax litigation, there cannot be an element of surprise. Compliance essentially means that if you want to comply, you need to know what the rules are. The rules of the game cannot be changed midway, either through interpretation, because there is a lot of because of genuine reasons about interpretation of a particular rule, or there is some creative interpretation because there's a drive to increase revenue, or there's a genuine belief that the rule needs to be interpreted differently. When and how it happens leads to a lot of questions. Then, of course, there are all the procedural powers which lead into a lot of litigation. I think those of us in the High Court, particularly in the writ side, know that most writs are around procedural issues in tax processing, right? And in half of the cases, or more than half of the cases, about 70-80% of the cases, it's course correction and sent back to the department for fresh assessment, restarting the process, and all of that. So when you have sort of interpretation issues leading to litigation on the merits of the case, does it arise from surprise, or does it arise from creative interpretation? Does it arise from some sort of retrospectivity? And course correction in terms of processes. We need to separate the two if we are going to study tax litigation in detail and understand how each of them can be addressed. The procedural issues are easier to address. The issues around substantive nature, I think will take some more digging and some sort of SOPs that need to come into the department. For example, if there's a case where the courts have taken one strong view, then why should the department in some other state, some other officer take a different view? And it can be corrected. Those kind of corrections can happen fairly easily now, with all the technology updates. I think if a case is decided today, I think by 6 o'clock, I think all the legal magazines, the tax accountant magazines, all cover the judgment in detail. So in terms of course correction, in terms of getting houses in order to bring in some sort of discipline to decision making is one issue we need to study in detail. And that's where, our friends from Esperti, Fiscali have a lot to contribute, because they understand the workings of the pressures and pulls within the department. And I use this in a very vague sense. I'm not talking about any, malice or malified workings. No, I'm talking about straightforward workings. Just leave out all the rough edges. We don't have to worry about the rough edges, because rough edges cannot be solved through analyzing disputes. But just in terms of processes, I feel that a sense of discipline in how the dispute arises and how the assessment happens can lead to some sort of improvement in terms of the life cycle of a case. Suggestions about what should happen, I think there are many suggestions already. We won't go into it. What our approach has always been, first understand the data and then make the suggestions. And I always say, in the context of judicial, the heavy backlog in the cases, that listen, you can't analyze the backlog at the year end. Backlog piles up because there is day-to-day inefficiency in how we work. It's not just about the courts. I mean, all the players around the court, right? In how we work, that's why it leads up. I mean, if every day we are inefficient, obviously there will be a backlog. But even when you say every day we are inefficient, it's a loaded term, because judges work very hard. I'm sure Justice Aravind will now agree with us after he's been a judge for a couple of years. They have the toughest job in terms of the number of hours they have to put in. And I give one more example. When me and another lawyer, we have a case, we step up. In 5 minutes, both of us are, saying whatever we want. I normally use the word screaming whatever we want. And then something happens, we turn around and we walk out. Even before the judge has a time to have a sip of water, 2 more lawyers are standing there. That's the kind of pressure judges have when it comes to dealing with cases. And if you have a list of, say, 100 matters on a list, then it's a hopeless day, because at best you can get through 30 or 40 in a meaningful way, correct? And when we started looking at this decision-making power, a psychologist friend of mine told me that the optimal number of decisions a human being can make in a day is about 8 or 10. And I'm not talking about deciding cases. I'm talking about things like, what should I have for lunch today? That's an optimal decision, right? So that's the kind of problem that we are faced with. And what do we need to solve this kind of problem? We need a concerted effort to look at what we are doing on a daily basis. And that starts, as far as direct litigation is concerned, from the time scrutiny starts. So how do you look at all of this? So I'll stop there, because otherwise I always tell Surya, don't allow me to start first on dispute resolution, because I can go on and on, but I'll stop there and over to Pawan.
Thank you, Mr. Harish. Honorable Chief Guest, Justice Aravind, distinguished invitees, we are very thankful to you for taking your time out and helping us with a project which we have starting together between DAKSH and Esperti Fiscali. We start knowing things, that there are 2 certain things in life. One of them is taxes. But in our experience in the department, and in my little experience outside of it, we have noticed that certainty is one which has become which has over period of time has become completely uncertain. If not completely is an infinite kind of a thing, so it's tending to infinity. So when we had this opportunity to do this study along with DAKSH, we thought that we would contribute something. And we are very happy, and we reached out to you all. We are very happy that all of you could take time out and come here. And we are waiting to hear from all of you as to what ways we can address this issue of bringing back certain amount of certainty and timeliness in direct tax matters. Litigation is the thin end of the wedge. The certainty and timeliness shows up substantially from the litigation side. And if we look at the numbers, there are more than 5 lakh appeals pending. Majority of them are pending with the CIT appeals. The collection of taxes, which was some 68,000 crores in 2001, has now reached almost 25 lakh crores, which is budgeted for this year. But arrears have also gone up because the litigation relates to arrears. Arrears are now 48 lakh crores. In fact, everybody agrees, and the Lok Sabha committee, standing committee on direct access, has gone through this year's budget proposals and has noticed that there are different kinds of things which need to be addressed urgently. I wouldn't like to take you through all of this. We are waiting for the input from all of you to make this conversation, to start this conversation. We have shared the pointers. We are starting this roundtable as the first one with the topic of litigation management. Our purpose of the project is to ultimately have certain ways out to improve the certainty and timeliness in direct tax matters. With this, I'll request our Honorable Chief Guest, Justice K.V. Aravind, to give us his address.
Good evening, one and all. Good evening, one and all. For 23 years, though I had an opportunity to speak, but to be on one side. Now, and I used to speak only the tax administration. Now, I have this evening with an opportunity to interact and share few of my thoughts without siding with all the stakeholders. Maybe due to my office constraints, I have prepared some text, so I'll be making use of it. Before proceeding on the subject, I want to express that it gives me an immense pleasure to participate in this roundtable on initiatives for certainty and timelines in direct tax matters. I extend my congratulations to DAKSH and Esperti Fiscali, two distinguished groups that have jointly organized this important deliberation. As already introduced, DAKSH Society is a non-profit think tank working on the rule of law and institutional reform through a data-driven and citizen-focused approach to improving public systems. Esperti Fiscali, as the name suggests, founded by Dr. Zakir Thomas, Sri RSVS Pawan Kumar, and Sri Sanjay Kumar Verma, brings together decades of rich experience from the Indian Revenue Service in the fields of public finance and tax administration. Their collaborative effort to study and recommend improvements and changes in direct tax ecosystem with the objective of enhancing certainty, finality, and reducing litigation in direct tax matters is both timely and commendable. Direct tax form a vital component of nation's fiscal architecture. Apart from being a primary source of revenue, they serve as an instrument of social and economic justice. The contribution of taxpayer is not merely a financial obligation, it is a participatory act in the nation building. Through taxes, citizens contribute to collective well-being of society and support the development of infrastructure, education, health, and welfare. In this context, the role of the assessing officer assumes great importance. The assessing officer is not merely a tax collector, but a facilitator in implementation of fiscal policy. When Parliament enacts tax laws and provides tax benefits like deductions or incentives aimed at achieving social and economic objectives, the responsibilities lies on all stakeholders, tax administrators, professionals, and policymakers alike to ensure that these provisions are applied with fairness, transparency, and efficiency. This is one step which I feel that all the stakeholders should proceed. In either resolution of tax disputes or certainty, or even to the extent of avoiding the litigation itself. The transformation in direct tax ecosystem is steadily progressing towards greater fairness, transparency, and efficiency. These ideals can be realized by embedding certain guiding principles within the system, principles that form the very theme of today's roundtable discussion. The foremost expectation of every taxpayer is certainty and finality. Certainty in taxation fosters trust in the system, and finality is its natural consequence. Taxpayer may not voluntarily come forward unless certainty is assured and prolonged anxiety eliminated. Because this, in my experience, I have noticed, more of the time when the assessee files a return, he is being issued notice after notice, reopenings after notice. So the aim should shift in bringing in new taxpayers into the tax net. Maybe the taxpayers are not voluntarily, because maybe the wrong conception that has gone to the taxpayer saying that once you go, it is an invitation to the problem. That perception in the person who is responsible for contribution needs to be eliminated, and I am sure this forum will proceed in that direction. Equally important is the predictability of consequences so that taxpayer can plan their affairs with confidence. Certainty also depends on timely resolution of ambiguities. Where the law admits more than one interpretation, prompt and reasoned clarification, whether by legislative amendment, administrative instruction, or through judicial interpretation, can prevent prolonged disputes and enhance faith in tax administration. When an ambiguity is identified at the very inception of a new tax provision, whether it relates to an incentive or a new levy, it is desirable that such issues are promptly deliberated upon. These discussions can be held among officers, professionals, and industry stakeholders, or even through a collaborative forums involving all of them together. I am confident this platform plays an important and productive role in that direction. If ambiguities are detected early, necessary legislative corrections or clarifications can be introduced to remove uncertainty. However, when such ambiguities are allowed to persist, they often lead to divergent interpretations among professionals and assessing officers. This in turn results in conflict of opinion that escalate through successive levels of litigation. Ultimately, when a judicial pronouncement settles the interpretation, and if it is later pursued as inconsistent with the original legislative intent, subsequent retrospective amendments to realign the law with that intent tend to reignite disputes, bringing the matter back to square one. This cycle affects the certainty and finality that taxpayers rightfully expect. This is where some wisdom is required when an interpretation is given in a right or other way. The dispute which has gone up to the last stage, or that is up to Supreme Court, this bringing in retrospective effects, retrospective legislation, and reopening those all settled cases would certainly give an uncertainty, and it is adding to the long pendency before all the forums. Early identification and resolution of ambiguities would therefore not only enhance taxpayers' confidence in the system, but also reduce the burden on judicial forums, contributing to a more stable and predictable tax environment. Certainty and early resolution would encourage voluntary tax compliance and foster a climate conducive to invest and entrepreneurship. The resolution framework in direct tax system should be fair, predictable, transparent, and user-friendly. Uncertainty not only affects the taxpayer, it also creates an administrative burden on the department and systemic delay in justice delivery system. The early resolution of dispute can be achieved by identifying areas of divergence and providing constructive solutions to address them. Since this platform is dedicated to conducting independent studies and recommending improvements and reforms in direct tax ecosystem, a greater responsibility naturally rests upon it. I am confident that in the days to come, this platform will emerge as a source of practical solutions for reducing tax disputes through its collaborative studies involving all stakeholders. While there exists several institutions devoted to research for the benefit of taxpayers and training centers across India to equip assing officers, there is presently no common platform for combined deliberation among assing officers, taxpayers, and other stakeholders. Such collaborative engagement would enable independent analysis and evolution of workable solutions. If this is achieved, it will significantly contribute to effective tax administration, greater taxpayer confidence, and certainly and finality in tax matters, while simultaneously reducing the burden on the adjudicatory or appellate forums, including the courts. This platform has a role to play in avoiding disputes through meaningful deliberations by suggesting clarity in legislation, consistency in administrative interpretation, and effective mechanism for early resolution. Certainty and timelines can also be achieved through simplification of tax laws, stability in policy, capacity building in tax administration, and strengthening alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. Alternative dispute resolution mechanisms play a major role in litigation policy. This roundtable has the benefit of diverse voices from administration, profession, and industry. It can deliberate on practical and implementable measures. Tax litigation contributes significantly to the pendency before courts and tribunals. Time-bound resolutions would allow professionals and administration to focus on compliance and systemic improvements. If disputes are not resolved in a timely manner, they can impede institutional progress. Prolonged attention to unresolved matters diverts administrative focus and resources, thereby diminishing the efficiency and quality of engagement with current issues. Often, litigation leads to differences in understanding of tax avoidance and evasion. Commonly, tax evasion is colored as tax avoidance and tax avoidance as evasion. Therefore, there is a need to understand the thin line that differentiates the two. One of the ways to achieve this is through deliberation in platforms like this event. With systemic changes, economic growth, and other issues burdening the courts, it is high time to think not only for early resolution, but of avoiding litigation itself. The income tax law carries the beauty of following more than one view. In the pre-faceless regime, the assing officer had the benefit of interpreting or reading a particular provision from the perspective of the assessee or the representative, and equally, the assessee's representative had the benefit of perspective of assing officer, leading to mutual persuasion and limiting errors. In the faceless environment, such persuasion is very limited. This leads to divergence, which further results in litigation. This can be avoided by constant capacity building. This, I have a practical experience. Whenever I used to interact with officers, they used to say, Mr. Aravind, this is only about this section. When I used to request, please get 2 income tax acts. Please go through the facts. Now read section. In every case, maybe I would have read 10 or more than that with one officer. All the times it has given 10 results. So the major, one of the course correction available to the assing officers was the persuasion by the professionals. They would have insisted the assing officers to read a particular provision in a particular manner. So now I think that opportunity of persuasion is very limited, and the errors are bound to increase. So this needs some course correction with a capacity building among the assessing officers. Another recourse that is the study circle can concentrate is a pre-legislative deliberations. If proposed changes are deliberated among experts and stakeholders, it gives insights and brings inclusivity and certainty. This, even I have noticed and read in newspapers or social media, that Ministry of Finance will be conducting or interacting with the stakeholders before every budget. I think the opinions of the stakeholders reaches the parliament. Bill is already presented. So this needs some meaningful deliberation, and the deliberations, the results of the deliberations, the views of the experts, the views of the stakeholders needs attention by the policymakers. For this, I think this forum can step in on behalf of all the stakeholders and make a suggestion for at least the commencement of these deliberations at the earliest. These differences, if any, can be assessed, and even the possible litigation that arises from that, the new laws that are going to be introduced, if that is introduced. So this is where I said the early resolution, the avoidance of litigation is better than the early resolution. Because of, due to various constraints from the tax administration side, they may have the limited role in making this suggestion. And now all present here, all the professionals and stakeholders present here, now you exercise 100% freedom of speech. Now you are free to express your views, and I strongly appeal to all present here to raise these grievances, and whatever the shortfalls are there should be brought in, so that the precious time of the assessing officers or the tax administration or the tribunals or the courts are dedicated or used for the better cause. Litigation management is very much necessary. There is a need for early resolution of recurring disputes. Recurring disputes needs early identification. This reduces the burden on the courts and tribunals as well as on the administration and taxpayers. This litigation management is, if a dispute arises in a first year, and that is likely to recur in the coming years also, there is a need for early resolution of that, the recurring dispute. What happens is the assessing officer decides, the matter will go and land up before the appeals. Appeal decides, it is before tribunal. Likewise, the issue is live up to Supreme Court. The matters are pending up to Supreme Court. The assessing officer is bound to commit the wrong just to keep the the revenue. The assessing officer's files I used to notice to keep the issue alive. So the keeping the issue alive will add burden on the tax administration, on the tribunals, courts, and also on the every stakeholder, including the professionals. This can be avoided by identifying recurring issues at the earliest, and if solutions are made out, so that will, to that extent, the litigation can be avoided. Decision should be made to bring judicial clarity on priority, and this can be achieved only with institutional coordinations. Because if this early resolution has to happen, all the stakeholders' cooperation is very much necessary. If the assessee's representative is willing for early hearing, if the revenue is not agreeable or revenue makes the assessees, then it will not achieve. That's why the institutional coordination is very much necessary. A majority of disputes in taxation arises from interpretational ambiguities, lack of consistency in administrative practice, and procedural rigidity. These can be avoided or resolved at the earliest if mechanism for dialogue and clarification are established. Even I'm sure among the tax practitioners, there are weekend study circles. Mr. Narendra will agree. And this is where one of the flat forum is the issues that are being faced from the assessee side are deliberated, and they come out with effective propositions to resolve the dispute. That I think that concept is missing on the revenue side. I think that may be the reason why there are the results of the litigations are varies when pro or assessee. That variation we can find. Consistency and timelines ensures confidence and voluntary compliance by taxpayers. If certainty remains in tax dispute, it has a chilling effect on the business sentiments also. The Authority for Advance Ruling and Settlement Commission were conceived with the objective of bringing certainty. It appears the composition of alternative dispute resolution forums have not persuaded the stakeholders due to the compositions and lacks trust. This, if the taxpayer or the advisor should have a confidence in that institution if you want to approach. If the dispute raised by one of the member of the tax administration is to be taken before another officer or of the tax administration, I think the reluctance will be there. Maybe that may be the reason why the expected results are not yielded from these Authority for Advance Ruling or settlement commissions. Stability, clarity and fairness in tax administration need meaningful implementation. I hope this platform will bring some solutions in that direction. It is also important to understand business and technology. Unless the business model of the taxpayer is known to the assessing officer, the possible errors in interpretation cannot be avoided. Here, unless the assessing officer adjudicating the claims made by the assessee, unless he knows how the business of the assessee works, he cannot decide whether the claims made by the assessee are relevant or in the course of business or not. This is where in view of the change in technology and the different types of businesses, so some programs are required for assessing officers to understand the latest the business modules, so that the possibility of the number of errors that being committed can be reduced. Quality of litigation is another factor relevant to today's subject. Litigation is inevitable to some extent. However, quality litigation leads to effective resolution. The cases proposed to be brought for judicial adjudication should be the best cases, and those require proper representation. Better judicial resolution can happen only with best cases, best representation, and quality litigation. Cases having a strong foundation in fact and law would fit into the basket of the best cases. If I had to share in my experience, in the first year, the first assessment order is made. That order is carried in appeal. Again, the reasons are supplemented. Whatever the shortfalls identified or flagged by the assessees or their representatives are covered in subsequent assessment years. But the first case continues as a lead case, and that is put to test before the judicial forums, be it a tribunal or high court. And once the tribunal decides the issue, high court decides the question of law. Irrespective of the facts, the moment courts look at the question of law, it is same, simply closed as covered. Now, this is where some steps are to be suggested by this forum in selection of the best cases to put it for judicial test. It is not the first case. work needs to be made by the officers and also the taxpayers, because always I say the results in tax disputes is a double-edged sword. In one way, it helped the assessee, but if vice versa applied, it may affect the assessee who is not before the court. So there, the independent approach by all the stakeholders, including the professionals and the tax administration, needs some focus on that issue. With these insights, I conclude my inaugural address. I congratulate the organizers for this timely initiation and extend my best wishes. I am confident that the ideas and recommendations emerging from this platform will guide meaningful reform and help achieve fair and swift resolution. May this initiative lead to constructive recommendation that guide future policy and administrative reform in India's tax system. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm very tempted to convert this into a vote of thanks. It's been a very balanced speech and really overwhelmed. The systemic issues, the concerns of businesses and individuals, so well brought out. I hope we will live up to our expectations. With this, we will commence our round table in the form of seeking inputs from the stakeholders. We have about 90 minutes, almost. We can conclude a bit earlier than 8 o'clock because we have to break for dinner. But I would request all of you to view this as a very deliberative exercise, which is constructive in nature, where we are seeking to solve problems while being mindful of what are the ground realities. The recording is going to stop now. If we can stop the recording now, there is going to be under a Chatham House